All right, a good Monday afternoon to you. Meteorologist Brian McClure. As promised, earlier talk that I gave this morning, I was talking the specifics of why Karen is the way it is, why it's so weak, why it's so disorganized, why I wouldn't be surprised to actually see it weaken and not be a huge threat to Puerto Rico and the islands. But I also described why there was this really weird track down the road where it kind of looks like it just sits there and maybe even drifts to the west. Well, that's not your eyes deceiving you. That is true. There is this possibility of it sitting there stationary for 2 or 3 days, south of Bermuda, north of Puerto Rico, east of the Bahamas. And yes, there is even a chance that it drifts back to the west. There's also a chance that it drifts more to the northeast, which is why I think you're just going to see a big blob out here, probably in about 4 to 5 days. And it's going to be really difficult to ascertain. Is it going to go west? Is it going to go east? Is it going to go farther north? Heck, it's going to be hard to even determine what it's going to be at that point in time because as of right now, again, it looks really weak. And that's something I talked about in my earlier talk. All right. I promised in my earlier talk that instead of talking high pressures and pressure gradients and wind shears and satellites, that I would talk about spaghetti plot. What I want you to see in this one is a European ensemble. We ran every single 50 members, okay? So every single member of the European run, we ran them with slightly different variables deliberately to say, okay, if it's this variable and we shade it just a little bit different, like we change the pressure a little bit, or we change the temperature a little bit, or we change the wind a little bit, what will it do? And so that's what an ensemble or a spaghetti plot is. And this is what it came out to. Generally speaking, I personally love to forecast based on consensus, meaning don't go with these little outliers where, okay, there's 1 in 50 chance of that happening. No, that's very, very rare for anything like that to happen. Instead, go with the consensus. Consensus is it's going to drift north. The problem is after that, there is no consensus. There's these weird little things. It almost looks like, Medusa's hair. It's just kind of crazy all over, right? It's just kind of nuts. Well, the reason for that is you have to have an understanding of spaghetti plots, ensembles, how they work. And it's not as simple as, oh, it just means the storm's going to get up here and then it's probably going to go where the general motion is to the west. Yeah, it might do that. But what the models are trying to tell you is when we gave it 50 different variables and ran it 50 different times, it basically said, gosh, I don't know, it could be anywhere out here at that point in time, 4 to 5 days down the road. Okay? What you also have to understand, and can be very frustrating from a tropical meteorologist perspective, because everybody loves to show these spaghetti plots around the world. And everybody sees these lines like this, and they go, oh my gosh, look at that one. And wow, look at that one. And oh no, is that one going for Savannah or Jacksonville? That's not really the way to look at something like this, because that line might not mean what you think it means. Yes, an eventual track could come back west to Florida. But I want to show you something different that more the experts use. We tend to use not just ensemble forecasting, but we also tend to look at what the ingredients would be like if it went west at this time. All right, so this is more realistic. You see all these green lines and how they're going north like this? Okay, that's a general consensus. And by the way, when you see it get to about here, we have a pretty high confidence that's about where it's going to be in day 3, 4, 5, 6, something like that. So later this week. We have 0 confidence in whether or not it drifts a little bit this way, this way, this way, this way, or this way. I'll just be honest with you. Anybody that says they're highly confident, they're wrong, and they're just deceiving you because there is no confidence at that point in time. The only thing we do know is that once it gets to this point, there will be a strong high pressure. And I talked about that in my earlier talk, which is why, yes, we're thinking it probably does drift west. But look at how there are these little colors at that time. See how there's a little bit of an orange color, a blue color, a green color. Okay, that's what real meteorologists do. We start digging into the details of what that storm might look like at that point in time. And I'm not going to go too deep into those colors, but essentially what it means is if you give this storm a certain variable right now, take it out the next 6, 7 days, it's basically saying, hey, I am seeing a westerly turn, but about half of these are showing that if it does go west, it'll be really, really weak. The other half are saying, yeah, I think it actually could strengthen a little bit, but it would have to have perfect ingredients where there'd be no wind shear up in here, and perfectly warm waters and nothing working against it. Well, you'll be happy to know that very, 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 very few, like literally only about 4 out of the 50 models right now, show that perfect ingredients. What most of them are showing is that it's kind of coming up here, wobbling around for a few days, and then kind of limping itself off to the west with tons of wind shear working against it. All right, well, if that's the case, then the last thing you want to do is basically worry people that a massive hurricane could be coming right at their state. Instead, what you need to do is you need to say, hey, there's a storm that's probably going to be out here at the end of this week going into the weekend, and then early next week it might come westward, and you do need to keep an eye on it. Here is the GFS American model, and I know a lot of people dog it out, but believe it or not, it is pretty good in most cases. The European is good in a lot of cases. The GFS American model is good in a lot of cases. Well, look at it, and you start to see my point. There's a lot of good consensus right up to here, okay? So this area, we are highly confident in. It's after that we're not confident. I mean, look at this. There's like one here. Okay, there's one here. There's one here. But notice none of them are strong. None of them are saying that this beastly hurricane is going to come out to the west. Well, you see this blue line? That is what we call the operational run. That is what most non-trained, non-expert tropical meteorologists will show you at home. They'll show you this blue line and say, see, it's going right for Miami and it's going to be nasty and huge and horrible. But do you notice something? There's not a single other line that does what that operational does. So my point in this is, please, please be very careful when looking at spaghetti plots, ensembles, other websites, and non-trained meteorologists, because yes, it could come west towards Florida, but we're talking a whole week away, and a lot can happen during that time. I wouldn't even be surprised if Karen maybe falls apart for a little while, comes back from the dead, reforms, gets really, really strong. I would not be one bit surprised if it gets really, really strong right out in here, and then tries to drift back to the west, and then starts to weaken again. Seriously, I wouldn't be one bit surprised if something like that happens, because there's just a lot going on in the atmosphere. So for now, that's why if people start to ask, well, I don't understand, why is this kind of drifting around and then showing a westward movement? That's scaring me. I live in Florida. Now you know why, okay? You shouldn't be scared, but hey, if you live in Florida, you should always be prepared for tropical weather. I mean, that's just the life we live, especially in September and October. So yes, keep an eye on it this week, but don't be terrified. Just keep an eye on it. We'll let you know. And of course, I'll be watching it every single minute of every single day this week. And I'll give you the latest tidbits that I'm seeing, the latest trends that I'm seeing. But for now, I just kind of wanted to give you an overlay and a summary of what spaghetti plots are and why trained meteorologists are the ones that use them to give a story, an idea of where a storm might go way down the road. All right, that's it for now. Have a great rest of your Monday. I'm meteorologist Brian McClure.